Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Say Again with me, Amrita Tripathi. We've been in conversation this whole season with leaders and change makers, talking to them about their own domain expertise, their own success stories, but equally what goes on behind the scenes. What makes them tick? How do they deal with the challenges that life throws at all of us? And I'm beyond delighted today to have with us Keshav Suri, the founder of the Keshav Suri Foundation. Keshav is also the executive director of the Lalit Hospitality Group, the co-chair of the FICCI Task Force on DE&I, and our paths have crossed over the years, Keshav, in various avatars of yours. Thank you so much for taking out the time today.
Thank you for having me. Namaskar.
Keshav, let me start by asking you, you've had a very, very interesting career and you have many esoteric interests and many mainstream interests as well. Let me start by asking you, what do you think is the most impactful thing you've ever done or that you do day to
day? Wow. Okay, that's really a challenging question. It seems like it's a question that I've been asked also many times. And for me, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. It's a mix of, I guess, everything. A lot of people, what they know me for probably the most is my petition for the reading down of Section 377, which I filed in 2017. And of course, there was a landmark verdict that came out in 2018, which finally read down and therefore decriminalized homosexuality in 2018. Though, of course, the history of it was already a decriminalization that happened in 2009 in the High Courts. Then it got decriminalized in 2013 by the Supreme Court. And then it finally got read down in 2018. But I think what I'm really most proud of is the world that we've created at the Lalit and the work that we do at the Keshav Suri Foundation. And when I say the world that we've created at the Lalit, the very queer world that we've created, which has basically led to an internal and an external movement of sorts within the people that are working with us and the people also that come to our hotels as customers. And I think the fact that we promote and we want all our family to live their authentic selves and to be who they really want to be and without judgment, to wear their sexualities on their sleeves, to wear their gender on their sleeves, to wear their different abilities on their sleeves. And therefore, this queer little happy space that I think we made, the family that works with me, I think that's probably what I'm most proud of. And then there's so much, I leave it at that.
Keshav, let me pick up from some of that. There's a lot to unpack from that beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing. There's so many facets to your life. I do want to ask you one thing, though, because, it has been, my experience when we've talked to people from the queer community. Of course, as you said, being one of those petitioners, that was a big moment. That was a watershed moment for many activists, many community members. Why was it important for you to sort of lead that charge legally? Because, of course, it did put you in the spotlight, which may not have been something you chose or may not have wanted, given the situation of the country at the time. Can you take us through a little bit about your thinking on why it was important to lead this fight?
I think a lot of it has to do with my privilege, and I have to keep checking my privilege. I have to, understand that my story and my journey, whatever it may be, is not reflective of the entire community, and it can never be. And more so, I do come from a place of privilege. Now, checking that privilege is important, but also using that privilege for my community, which is the LGBTQIA plus community, to get its recognition, its freedom, its basic human right of to live with dignity, to live with to live with freedom of love and expression. I think that the the people or the queer community in particular that has that privilege, it was important for them to actually use it to be able to fight for and community that may not be able to be fighting for it. And therefore, um, nobody asked me to do it. I did it for my own volition, and you can come back and throw it back at me. I did it maybe for attention seeking. I did it for whatever. No, the reason I did it was simple. And had I not done it, I'm sure others would have. It's not like I was the one only alone person fighting this. There were 5 petitioners, individual petitioners before me. There was Ritu Dalmia, there was Navdeep Singh Johar, there was Aman Nath, there was Sunil Mehra, there was Aisha Kapoor. And of course, before that, there was the Naz Foundation. And then right after my petition, there were 20 other IIT petitioners, and then there were also Humsafar Trust and various other petitions where the Supreme Court finally said, we know that okay, these are enough number of queer people, and we know that they exist, and now we will go straight for hearing. Why they said that was because in 2013 the Supreme Court turned around and said, who are these gay people? Who are these lesbian people? It's too minuscule a minority for us to care about. And therefore, I really think that when that happened, when the judge said, "Who are these gay people? Who are these lesbian people? And do you know any?" I think it was important for us as gay people, as lesbian people, and also people who had access to brilliant sets of legal minds, like Saurabh Kirpal, like Menika Guruswamy, like Arundhati Katru, like Mr. Mukul Rohgi, like so many others that have been working on this, and in particular the queer lawyers like Saurabh and Menika and Arundhati, we had access to them. They are the ones who came to us and said, you know what, put this out there, and we may win, we may not win, but at least you would have declared yourself to be an openly out queer person and want to fight for the right of living with dignity in your country. And privilege or not, nepo baby or not, you've put your money where your mouth is. And I think this I have to give to the lawyers that were on this. So petitioner, fine. Okay, we give a lot of credit to the petitioners, but the real credit needs to be given to the lawyers and also to the judiciary, in particular the 5 bench constitutional judges and the chief justice of that time, who actually gave not just simple verdicts. They gave like poems, essays, love letters, and then talked about further equality. And so I think that had I not done it, somebody else would have. And I think that did it put me into the spotlight, and good, bad, or ugly? I think I was smart enough to know that this is what's going to happen. I also was very clear that I'm not going to be just a petitioner. I know very well that by then I had established Kirisu, I had established what we were doing with Keshav Suri Foundation. And I knew that I'm doing this not just for a selfish need only, which is for myself and for my husband to live in this country that we have chosen. But I was doing this also for my team, that were working with us, for my Mahi, or for my my first ever trans person. And now, of course, this is about LGB rights that I'm talking about. The transgender community has its separate fight and has had their own sort of legal recognition, which happened in 2014 and which happened with the transgender bill in 2019 and 20. But I think that for me in particular, by then, I was also one of the few corporates, and I still am, that had the highest number of transgender people working for us. And so within the entire spectrum of LGBTQIA+, I had team members that were identifying from each of these communities, and I still do. And at that time, so it wasn't just that, oh, I'm doing this for myself. It was really for my family already, which was my Lalit family and my Keshav Suri Foundation family, but then also the extended queer family that I had across the country. And I mean, the thing is that it's important to recognize that I my privileged background, and I'm not going to shit on privileged people or say anything that it's not. But yes, one of the things is that we do have to recognize it, and therefore,
Yeah.
because of the accesses that we had, this was something that I had to do about. And Amrita, it would have been somebody else. There's so many more queer people that have been at this. There's so many intersections also within the queer community, and those voices got amplified more.
Hmm.
So
That was, and it really does come across that the community really came together. I feel like, for the first time we saw in a very mainstream, very, very important watershed moment that it was. We did see, that it was quite a beautiful moment to see in this country. I do want to ask you, because when we talk about inclusion and diversity, unfortunately or fortunately, I think for a lot of people, it can end up feeling like a lip, some sort of lip service or a box that has to be ticked. So there'll be Women's Day for women's empowerment. There'll be, mental health days coming up. So there'll be, talk about the neurodiverse workforce. What do you think is
of
missing
course.
from the discourse? And how do you feel that, corporate leaders like yourself, what do you think needs to be done to change this from just a on paper conversation for a lot of people, and keeping in mind that there seems to be a bit of a backlash against DEI. I keep hearing in the US and other places, which may also come here. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that a DEI for us, and I think how it should be, it has to be a part of the DNA of the company, and it has to be a part of the DNA of the person that really firmly believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think equity is probably the one that gets the least amount of recognition and attention. And I think that equity should be at first. In fact, I've noticed that even in UK, they're now putting EDI, they're calling it EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because and maybe because they've just changed it because DEI is getting such a bad name in the United States. But I think the what is missing in the discourse maybe is this, that we need to make sure that we have people that are wanting, or the communities that you want to represent, um, in positions of decision making and in positions of power. How long are we going to keep the marginalized marginalized? And are we doing diversity and inclusion and just doing them at entry level positions? Or are you actually sitting and having trans people as general managers on your board of directors, and not just the tick mark activities of having X number of team members? No, how many, saying that you have X number of team members is great. How many of those X number of team members are in mid management, are in senior management, and are on your board? How many of them are empowered enough to take decisions for the communities that you want to represent? How many of them are bringing into communication and conversations religious diversity, casteism, and are ready to have uncomfortable conversations to make them so normalized that they are comfortable? And how many are taking that step forward, instead of turning around and saying that, oh, you know what, we want to hire so many people, we want to hire so many women, we want to hire so many trans people and queer people, but HR comes back and says, oh, but where are these people? They're not qualified, they're not, they don't have qualifications. Why? Because they're marginalized, so they don't have the access to that level of education to be able to sit in front of you to have that interview. How many companies then are doing something about structural reforms of going and giving the communities the tools that they need so that they can have that level playing field before they even come to the interview? So, by that meaning, how many companies are supporting fellowships, scholarships? How many are actually going and going into universities, picking out a whole bunch of students or giving scholarships to bunch of students and saying that this is a scholarship for quick? We've done that at our hospitality school at a very small level, but we have a Adityananda scholarship, which is a scholarship for LGBTQIA plus students who want to have a career in food production, in food service, and as well become patisserie and bakery chefs. We're the only university or hospitality school to have done that for LGBTQIA plus students. And I'm very happy at a very small stage, we've had a substantial number of students that have gone through that. We're also now taken our scholarship, which is Adityananda scholarship, but now we've done another scholarship called Apna Hira, which focuses only on neurodivergent students. And that we launched this year. So again, so here is an opportunity where we're taking neurodivergent kids, LGBTQ kids who finished school and basically gone and said that, okay, now you'll do college, you'll have that specific degree. So by the time they come to the HR for at least hotels and for at least F&B or restaurants or anybody that wants to have a hospitality and tourism degree. But I also think that hospitality and tourism also is, crisis management, risk management, all of that, different levels of management and personality management. So this person is becoming a full all-rounded individual to be able to get that job. So at least we have taken that stand that we are going to go and actually provide those opportunities so that HR doesn't have to ever say that we don't, have enough qualified people. And I think
Hmm.
that is what companies need to really think, because so many companies are able, and that will also then solve this whole affirmative action versus meritocracy versus uh, you know um, um, woke agenda kind of thing that we're trying to sort of push down. It'll really sort of answer a lot of those questions, and it will also show to all the haters that, okay, listen, we're supporting education, we're supporting job creation, we're
Yeah.
supporting, we're trying, we're not conditioning people. It's not like we're going in, it's a hospitality school. I'm not conditioning. And that's the other thing that a lot of people in United States are saying, oh, they're conditioning, or that they're making our kids trans, or they're making our kids gay. No, it's not what we're doing. We're giving a marginalized community that has been told for years that you are not good enough, that you were illegal, that you do not have the same rights as us, that you do not. And again, LGBTQ movement cannot be looked at just as an independent movement. It has mixes of feminism, it has mixes of different types of movements in one. A
Yeah.
lesbian woman is a woman,
Yeah.
or a gay man can be from different religions, different castes, different backgrounds. A trans person can also be encompassing of all of that. And so I think that it's very, very clear that we have to basically get a lot of these movements together. And anybody that has deeply felt marginalized, honestly, should basically come on board with the queer movement, because it is just that. And when you want to make a marginalized person, and again, I know it sounds odd for me to say that from the privilege that I come from and from the background that I come from, but again, you can't walk in everybody's shoes, but you can sure as hell try. And I have team members that that transcend into all of these backgrounds that I'm talking about. And that's why it's so important for a lot of my team members to share their stories. And that's why we keep doing that at the Lalit again and again and again, and put them in the forefront, because I want people to recognize that. I want people to say these are the intersections of our society. And
Yeah.
most of the time you will see it's not met with hatred, at least not in
Yeah.
India, at least
Yeah.
not in India. And there are certain things that we have to be proud of in India also, in the fact that we do have one of the most trans inclusive law in the entire world. You had the Nalsa judgment and the transgender protection bill on paper, yes. Maybe in actuality it has not translated into what it was supposed to be, but on paper it's there. So at least in India, when we put this out there, a lot of times it is met with questions, yes, but a lot of time love, because you're putting it out of from a place of love.
Yeah.
However, yes, I think if we focus more on equity and then brought in diversity and inclusion in thought,
That would.
mind, and process, I think it would take the movement even further.
No, that, and I love how much thought you put into this, and the fact that, of course, at the Lalit Group and at your foundation, your team has also been very clear that this is really core to your mission.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, so you've talked about privilege a few times. You brought up nepo baby, so I'm going to take that cue from you.
Yeah.
It's something I spoke about, to Raj Mariwala in an interview, and they've also
Oh,
been
wow.
very, very
I love
clear about
Raj. The
amazing
Mariwala
work.
Foundation, what they do is brilliant.
It's,
And
it's,
I'm very proud to say that Keshav Suri Foundation has also worked with them on queer affirming therapists, on mental
yeah,
health. The work that they
yeah.
do is insane.
So, so they were saying at one point, the thing is you have to recognize a privilege, but it's important to then see how you deploy that privilege. And of course, that's been core to their mission. I want to ask you a little bit about when it was for you that you started realizing that, maybe with great privilege comes great responsibility. It's not the norm for everybody, for sure. So for you, how did you start looking at that? Okay, I'm a nepo baby. I might be having, massive privilege that other people don't have, but actually, I have skin in the game. I do care about what happens next. How did that journey happen for you?
So, I think that for me, well, to be honest, the journey started the day I started, the day I came back to India after my father passed away. And I started work in the company. Just before that, I was like, no, I want to work and I wanted to get outside exposure. So I worked with Hindustan Unilever and for a short stint, and then came into the company. And I think I realized that okay, I'm here because of my parents. I'm here because of the because it's a Raja Beta that has come into the business. I had to check it then, and I had to basically be like, no, I need my team to see me in a way that I'm not imposed on them, in a way that I am embraced by them. And I think that became my mission from day one working here. But I think the time when I realized that I had to put my privilege and my skin in the game was when I think I launched Kirisu in 2011. That timing also was interesting because in 2009, the decriminalization happened. So when 2011 Kirisu opened up, we didn't need to have segregated places because we were marching towards an inclusive world already, especially in India. And so when I opened Kirisu, it was the queerest straight club in the country or in the world. So we didn't identify as anything, though of course Kirisu in itself was a character was so queer, and I was openly queer because the first thing that I did when I started work with the team was I came out to them and I said, I want you to know I'm queer, I'm gay, and let that be now not a water cooler conversation. Now judge me for the work that I do. And it took me a while to get there and to also earn their love and their trust, rightfully so. And I also had to have that as a part of my growing process. But when we launched Kirisu, and the way it was embraced by Delhi and then by also my team, and the fact that it became a success, so the team also saw some financial revenue out of it. I think that sort of made me realize that okay, now I'm finally taking what has been handed over to me, not taking it for granted, creating this space. Then of course when the 2013 judgment came in December, which reversed the High Court judgment, then Kirisu was one of the few places, and the Lalit was one of the first few places that went with the whole No 377 campaign. It was called the No Hate campaign, and it was around that time. And of course, again, fabulous people at NAS Foundation were pushing it, but not that many corporates or businesses were following up with them on that and putting it. We put it everywhere, and then little by little, we ended up with creating a drag culture, creating a queer culture, not creating. Okay, again, I want to check my words. We didn't create it, it existed. It already existed. We just were the first commercial place to give it such a large platform and bring in artists from United States like Violet Chachki and have so many people turn up for it. And then I realized that, okay, this is becoming a safe space. And then it was like, but this is becoming a safe space, which is kind of a mind effing because it's supposed to be a nightclub that is supposed to be overtly privileged, that is supposed, it's in a five-star luxury place, and there is a perception of who enters a nightclub, and you're segregating people with the way they dress and all. And then we were like, okay, now we need to change that. In that world that we were happening, suddenly there was a team member of mine who was not even a permanent team member, was working in the call center of Kirisu, and they decided to come out first as gay, and then within 6 months say that they are a trans woman. That team member led to one team member who was not a permanent team member, I have to say, led to such structural reform. Because everybody says that in corporates it works top down and not sort of bottom up. And no pun intended, being a gay man, I steal this joke always from Parmesh Sani. So it's not like we are obsessed with tops and bottoms. We're not. But here, in this case, Mahi brought this change because Mahi was like, okay, I'm transitioning. But now, what, creating safe spaces and having people to feel who they are is one thing. But to change company policies is another. And then I'm like, okay, do we have Mediclaim insurance to cover partnerships of same sex couples? At that time, we didn't. And Mahi was like, okay. And then I went to my Mediclaim insurance people and I said, if you have to do this. And they were like, oh, but 2014 is a criminal offense, blah, blah, blah. And I said, but there's nothing written that it doesn't, that you cannot cover insurance. And as per, anti-discriminatory policies, it's for everyone, not just for one. And so then I was like, okay, are you covering SRS surgeries, Mediclaim for SRS surgeries for people that are transitioning? And then I was like, but that is already by the NALSA judgment, you are supposed to do it. And so I was like, don't be convenient about it. But I have to say that the insurance company was quite fantastic because when I said to them, if you don't do this, I will take my business elsewhere. And they really sort of changed that and made us also an example for them to be able to take that to other companies. That's, I think, when I realized that I have to be able to put my, again, skin in the game, but also put my money where my mouth is. Me crying about my rights may look very odd to a lot of people because they're like, what is he, what problems does he have? And in a country when you live with such inequities,
Yeah.
of people, of backgrounds, of various stratas of society, why would this crying nepo baby about their poor little lives, poor little rich boy's life matter? And you know what? It doesn't, to be really honest. My story really doesn't matter. What does matter, however, are the stories of the over 200 queer people that work with us, the trans people that work with us currently, over
Mm.
1,000 that we have educated or we have worked with or we have trained. There over 1,000 lives that we have been able to affect through during the pandemic, when there was a mental health crisis that nobody wanted to talk about.
Mm.
Their lives matter, and their voices matter, and their intersections matter. And I think that for that purpose,
Yeah.
maybe then if I'm just a vessel, use that vessel.
Yeah.
If
Or you
that's
and
really,
you're able to champion their cause, right? That cause which you believe in.
yes,
Because that actually, no, I think I hear you. I feel like, at some level when you're talking, you also realize at, when you say you're not going to shit on privilege, I was laughing because I'm like, it's not that you don't have skin in the game as a privileged person. It is that people are like, well, worst comes to worst, you'll probably just, F off somewhere else, right? Like, I mean, you don't have to stay here and put up with,
you're right.
but, fighting and making that structural change, that makes such a huge difference. I think also as an example to other people, other companies, other teams, to know that you can do all of this with dignity. You can come to a workplace and be your whole self. I think that's something that's incomparable, and that's not something that you find that often in corporate India or the world, actually. And I think that's that. So hats off to you. I usually ask people how important they think empathy is in leadership, but I think you made that very clear. Just being mindful of your time, I'm just going to say I have a couple more questions for you
Okay.
on another note, coming back to you as an individual and as a leader and how you've grown in your own leadership journey, can you
Yeah.
share a little bit about anything that might have been a very, very hard time that you're comfortable sharing, where you had to kind of dig deep or find out who your real support system was, or find out who your real allies are? Because sometimes it's in the darkest times that you figure out who's who. Where when things are good, everyone seems to be an ally, but then when you have to
No,
really
you're
go through
right.
struggles, you,
The,
you realize.
Amrita, I firstly thank you for the compliments before this because whilst I say all of this and I sing a lot of my own praises and I already have this inflated sense of self, when I hear it from others, sometimes I'm like, it's a very sort of imposter syndrome. And I guess everybody has that nowadays. But whilst I will talk to you about my dark phase, and that I think people go through mental health issues all the time, and I don't see that there are many moments in one person's life. They're not just one moment. There are many moments when you can go through dark spaces. I just want to be cognizant of. I don't want to come across as a poor little rich boy crying about his oh so privileged life, and talking about and making everybody sort of cry.
No,
One
fair.
thing that I will say, and this is something that I want to push on in a big way, is just mental health in general is overlooked here, is overlooked in not just here, everywhere else in the world. And I think that that's something that we have to work on. Again, going back to Keshav Suri Foundation, we do give free mental health services to anybody and everybody that may come across, that may want to. I think the pandemic was one of the darkest times for a lot of people. And I think that again, I don't want to come across as somebody that is sort of crying about their lives, but it was a dark time, and in particular for the hospitality industry and travel and tourism. We were there first to be asked to shut down and the last to open. And so I and then having the responsibility of over 3,000 team members, and not knowing whether we will have a business, whether we will have they will have a life tomorrow, whether they suddenly first you are talking about years in the company for the team members to retire with you, and now you're having conversations about, I don't even know if you're going to be with us tomorrow. And that's really put all of us in a real dark space. But as a leader, I could not sit over there, switch on my camera, and start, crying and beating myself up. As a leader, I had to have some sort of delusion to say, no, 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 we'll get through this, we'll make it happen. And then I have to say, my team sort of completely threw a googly at me and said, you know what? Nobody wants to take the doctors in during the pandemic. We'll do it. My team said that. Nobody wants to go out there and give out meals to the sex worker community, to the trans community. We'll do it. Nobody wants to sit over there and wear thousands of PPEs and this and the other and come to work, but we will do that for the doctors who stayed for a year with us, not just in Delhi but also in Mumbai. And we were like, we don't, because what is it in hospitality for us? It is taking care of another human being. Human connect is most important. And for us, suddenly we took that away. So whatever chance we got, whatever chance, however, whenever there was lapses in certain amount of thing, whether it was essential services, whether they were like, okay, now we're opening up a little bit, whatever chances we got, we were like, no, we're going to. And my team turned around and said to me that it's okay. We know we they may be not know tomorrow for us, but we know that there are much more people that are much more affected by this. And in particular, within the various communities, sex workers and trans people, particularly the ones that were staying in many sort of areas that nobody wanted to give any relief services to. So we will go out there, and they did this in every state. So that showed the brightness, because but it was dark. What was the darkest in that point was my cousin who died by suicide. That when I said the Adityananda scholarship, it is named after him. And for me, I owe a lot of my life and my journey to my cousin, because he was also a gay man. He was older than me, and he was the my guru, as they would say. He opened the doors for me to be able to flourish and be myself. He was the reason, probably the one that took the maximum family hate, so that all the younger ones could come out and flourish. And so for me, and I should have done this maybe more when he was alive, but it's okay. This is also part of somebody's growing up journey. But for me, I think now everything that I do in Keshav Suri Foundation, a lot of it is just dedicated to his memory, because he also sort of taught me the various caste system that exists within the marginalized community. So if there was a sort of, caste system to say who in the pecking order of things, gay men and lesbian women, and then trans people, and knowing very well how marginalized trans people in that were. And, whether it was that, or whether it was also, my discovery of pop culture, or my discovery of RuPaul, or my discovery of Madonna, or my discovery of George Michael, or my discovery of Rekha and Khoon Bhari Mang, all of it I owe to him. And he was not just my cousin, but he was also my best friend. So to lose that, between the first wave and the second wave, I think that was a big thing. And then, of course, I lost my aunt and uncle also back to back during the second wave. And for me, again, I belong to a family of only super achieving women. And I understand that you can come back to me and say, why does everybody have to be super? Why do the marginalized community have to be super queers or super women? We can be mediocre too. But I have only seen super women. And so for my aunt and my mom are my mothers who brought me up. And my aunt is the one who also started step by step school and took it to the next level. So again, for me, I see her, I see my mom, who's my boss, and I see my three sisters. And so for that, and I guess maybe that gives me that position to be in, where I've only seen such strong feminine energy. And that feminine energy is the reason that I'm alive today. And that feminine energy is also the reason why I can flourish the way I have flourished. That feminine energy and that protective energy has sort of allowed me to be having this conversation with you. But in all of this, to cut a long story short, and I know I go into circles, is that whilst there have been many dark moments in my life, and I know that there probably will be even more. Nobody's dark moments just disappear. But the way my brain is wired and the way I try to sort of focus on is I want to go into the positives. I want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to try and bring that joy wherever I can and to whoever I can, so that I focus on that. Because, honey, there are a lot of voices in this head. And if I start digging into each of those voices,
Well, I think we're going to end in a minute on gratitude. I'm just going to say thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm so sorry for the loss. For anyone who might be listening to this who feels distressed, because suicide is unfortunately one of the leading causes of death, even for young Indians. And we've worked on this from the Health Collective. We just want to let people know that help is available, to know that you're not alone. And Keshav, the more we hear from people, though, Keshav, the more we realize that we need to know that that we're not alone in whatever these challenges are, challenging moments, dark moments. I think part of having and listening to you right now also is, can we mainstream some of these conversations, let people know that when things are dark there still is hope, because there are people out there, there are helplines, you can access that help. So I want to just wind down with asking you these two things. You spoke very beautifully about your mom and your sisters and your aunt. If we had to ask you one or two things that you're grateful for right now, but before that, I just want to ask you a little bit about, I know the mental health work your team has been doing.
yeah.
Is partly the reason for this because you've seen the other side of, what happens when people don't have access to help. Can you talk about that? And then we'll wind down with gratitude.
Okay. So, yes, it wasn't just because somebody died by suicide in my family. The work on mental health actually started before, when we launched the foundation. And when we launched the foundation, we first worked with the It Gets Better project. And everybody knows the It Gets Better project was set up originally by the Trevor Project, which was about prevention of suicide with teenage, because there was a big pandemic or epidemic of suicides. And I know that also might be a problematic word, but there was just basically a lot of teenage bullying that was taking place in the United States. There's still a lot of teenage bullying that exists across the world. And so the Trevor Project came up with this It Gets Better project, where they talked about, a short form video for showing stories of how it gets better and why, and, trying to bring in celebrities, trying to bring in people to be able to change the mind of the person in those 2 minutes when they feel the darkest or when they feel the loneliest. that was the intent of actually when the foundation started. Of course, the foundation is doing much more work and has sort of moved into a lot of work with neurodivergence and also acid attack warriors. But the focus on mental health and access to mental health was already there, and the intent was already there. But of course, when I had somebody very close to me, pass away or die by suicide, I think it amplified the work. And then it amplified in this aspect that we needed to make sure that there were enough counselors. Now, what happened was that firstly, psychiatry counseling, it already is a minuscule minority. Talk about a minuscule minority for the large population that exists in India. Then on top of that, the number of queer affirming psychiatrists, therapists, and as well as counselors is even more of a minuscule minority. And that's when we decided to work with the Mariwala Foundation. Mariwala Foundation has this fantastic queer affirming uh, sort of program where they basically work with therapists and get them to be queer affirming. We also now work with the Karma and also the LGBTQ Center, which is run by the NAS, which is run by NAS Foundation, and a lot of it is on mental health. I don't think enough is enough. I think that there is a lot more that needs to be done here. And then more importantly, so one is to firstly get the right kind of therapist, but the other is to also make sure that it is accessible to everybody, not just to in the handful of people that I think, or it doesn't be that, or again, that whole thing on, mental health is just a privilege thing or it's just an urban thing. No, mental health and crisis helplines are required across the country in all areas. And like I said, our work is very small in it, but our intent was always about wanting to do work on mental health and also wanting to bring out. I mean, our motto started with embrace, empower, and mainstream the community, but it was really to bring out more stories, but also not just have those stories go into a space on YouTube. It was to actually see what we have done to actually be a part of those stories and build those stories and help whoever needed to. It sounds also like that we've got a bit of a savior complex. And I really, when you do work on DEI or when you do work on NGOs, suddenly you feel that you are a savior.
What
Look,
is happening? Yeah, you've not simple. Next your next avatar or life, you might want to pick a small problem and just be like, actually,
yeah,
but but I love
yeah.
that. That authenticity, that passion. We actually had one of your teammates on last year. We were doing mental health and storytelling and why it's important, and we had one of the counselors from your team join us at the Health Collective for that. And I just find the more we have these conversations, the more you hear from people who are going through challenges, the more helpful it is, right? Because I think when we were growing up, and even 10 years ago, these conversations were not nowhere near enough. And I just hope that we can all do our bit
They still
there.
are not. They
They're
still
not.
are
I
not.
know they're not.
Not
But
in
you do have.
schools, not in universities, not within, but it's a real onion. And once you start peeling, you realize that, wow, okay, it's really something that needs so much of work and so much of attention and bandwidth
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. And even, I mean, championing or amplifying the work that's already being done out there, making sure that, like you said, young people in schools and colleges have access to the help or resources they might need. But that's a bigger problem, another conversation we'll have to follow up on. Let me wind down by asking you one or two things you are grateful for today.
Um, the feminine energy that I have in my life, I think that's pretty much what I'm most grateful for. My mom and my sisters and my aunt, and I'm grateful to my husband as well, because putting up with me is not easy. Dealing with me and my insanity, my insecurities, my voices in my head, and dealing with all the stuff that I'm constantly putting him through, I'm very, very grateful. I'm giving you a full list of things that I'm grateful for, and I'm
I love it.
most grateful for my team, my family at the Lalit, my family at the Keshav Suri Foundation. Without them, I don't exist. So I think, yeah,
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. For anyone watching or listening this, I do need to figure out whether Keshav is joking about those voices in his head, but that will be a follow up, a sequel which we plan for some time next year. It's been such a joy to talk to you, and the passion that you bring to all of these projects and these big problems really comes through. Thank you so much, and I hope that
thank
helps with
you.
your imposter syndrome at some point. Thank you so
I,
much.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing all the work that you do.